Hey, everybody, it's Maria Boynton. Thank you so much for joining me for another edition of Atlanta Up Close. Of course, it's election season, political season. We're here with the guy himself, Tharon Johnson, political strategist. How you doing?
I'm good, Maria. How are you doing?
I'm good. Quickly tell people about your business.
Paramount Consulting Group. I'm the CEO and founder. We've been in existence since 2017. Prior to that, I had worked with a couple international law firms. But simply put, we do consulting, we do lobbying, government affairs for a lot of clients. But we're at the intersection between politics and business, and we do whatever we can to get things done for our clients.
Want to give a shout out to the Georgia gang. Thank you for taking time away to come sit with little old me.
Listen, always when you call. And yeah, Georgia Gang is doing very well. Thank you all so much for those of you who watch.
And of course, we want to do a little setup here. I'm going to use you to set up the interviews that I have coming on this weekend. We talk about, let's start with the Georgia governor's race. I mean, right now we know that you've got quite a few Republicans, quite a few Democrats who are vying to be the leader of this state. What type of person, Tharon, does it take, you think, to lead a state like Georgia?
Well, let's start on the Republican side.
Okay.
You know, ever since Rick Jackson has entered this race, it was probably the best kept secret in politics ever when you had a man who was in the healthcare business who decided to step out and become a candidate for governor. So he spent an enormous amount of money. He's now leading in the polls. We got to see if that actually holds enough for him to get into the runoff. And then you got Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, who's a Trump-endorsed candidate. He's been in the race as long as the other candidates before Rick Jackson got in the race. He's right now at second place, but he's also spending a lot of money. Just did a telephone town hall with Trump. And then you got Chris Carter, the Attorney General, who is definitely struggling a little bit in the polls. He's in fourth place. And then Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, who's entered the race, who's in third. So I think right now you see Raffensperger with a lot of momentum. Carr is still trying very hard to break through. But if I had to predict today, it's going to be a runoff between Rick Jackson and Burt Jones.
Okay, let's talk about the Democrats.
Democratic side, there's two things that's been consistent. Let's start with the first thing. Number one, former Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, in every single poll that I've seen, independent, external, internal, she's in first place, largely because of her name recognition. She has some positives, she has some negatives. The other thing that's been very consistent in every single poll, maybe except one, so let's say I've seen a dozen polls, but except one, Michael Thurman has been the clear number two choice based on his favorabilities, based on his name recognition, and people knowing him across the state, and they think he's the most qualified person in the race. Then you have Jason Estevez, who's a young, bright star who's spending a lot of money. He's definitely getting some surge from the money he spent. And then Jeff Duncan, who's a person who used to be a Republican, now he's a Democrat, has come on the scenes. A lot of people are like paying a little bit more close attention to his campaign. So I will make a prediction that based on the information I have today and early voting numbers, which, by the way, Democrats are doing a really good job.
Record-setting numbers, according to the Secretary of State.
It's Keisha Lance Bottoms in a runoff, and then the question is, who is in the second spot? Will it be Jason Estevez? Will it be Mike Thurman or Jeff Duncan? Based on the polling, based on the momentum and the things that are happening, I think that Michael Thurman has a pathway to get in a runoff with her, and I think Jason Estevez also has a pathway to get in a runoff with Keisha Lance Bottoms.
You know, it seems to look pretty tame to me right now. I mean, we've seen previous campaigns that went off the rails, people with guns pointing them at teenagers, things of that nature. This time around, until Rick Jackson got in the race, the only thing I can say that we've seen is a video from folks saying anybody but Jeff Duncan. Other than that, we've seen the Burt Jones, Rick Jackson going back and forth. Am I not seeing it properly here? It seems pretty tame right now.
Maria, you're exactly right. What you see on the Republican side, and they've sort of toned it down a little bit now. I think somebody told them to sort of tamp it down. But before this maybe sort of recommitment to talking about the issues on the Republican side, it was Rick Jackson telling you how bad Burt Jones was, and it was Burt Jones telling you how bad Rick Jackson was. Rick Jackson was telling you that Burt Jones was this shady businessman who uses his office and lieutenant governor to do deals. Burt Jones was telling you that Rick Jackson, he wants you to believe that he's this billionaire who's never done any thing to hurt Georgians, but he had this relationship with Planned Parenthood. And also in the debate, he asked him if he ever had an illegal immigrant, I like to refer to them as undocumented workers, working for him. So you saw a lot of back and forth, but now they're going to the issues. Contrary to what you see on the Democratic side, it's been about the issues. It's been about affordability, cost of living, education, public safety, health care. There have been some, anybody but Jeff Duncan ads out there. There have been some people that have questioned Keisha Lance Bottoms about her record. We saw Jason Estevez do that. But ultimately, I think it's been civil. But it's not over yet. Anybody can put up a website, anybody can put up a link, and you can see this race get really, really negative.
Most recently, we saw the U.S. Supreme Court take another stab at the Voting Rights Amendment of 1965, or the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Might be more along the line when we talk about the race of Secretary of State that deals more so with voting. But when we talk about the area of governor in that particular race, has anyone come out about the Supreme Court issue or affected voting rights at all?
Maria, this is one of the things that I think that voters are not talking about enough, and I want to take a few seconds to do this. You know, I come from the John Lewis School of Politics.
Right.
He was my former boss, my hero. And I see Republicans go out every single year, sometimes twice and 3 times a year, and they compliment Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. They compliment Mrs. Lowry. They compliment the King family. They talk about Congressman Lewis and all these civil rights icons that have paved the way, the Abernathys and all these folks. But then for them to come out right away when a federal decision was made on the Louisiana case, and for those Republicans to say, hey, we need to have a special session to go utilize this Supreme Court decision to redraw maps in the state of Georgia was just very disappointing, and I think honestly very disingenuous. And I want to remind your listeners and your viewers that hold these Republicans accountable, because they can't get out here and say these good things about these civil rights people, particularly Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. When you look at it, Voting Rights Act of 1965 was one of his biggest, I would say probably the largest policy decision that he drove with working with the president at the time in the Congress. Now let's talk about how it affects Georgia.
Yeah.
Governor Kemp was very smart to say, I am not going to touch the maps now. One of the reasons he did that, Maria, is because he knows that people are already voting. If you do that in Georgia, you're basically discounting and disregarding the votes that have already happened. 2, he's very focused on helping Derek Dooley try to become the U.S. Senator, so he doesn't want to do anything to make more people get upset and turn out to vote against something. So I think it was the right thing to do for the governor, but I will tell you this. We have a legal path to fight with this, and we have an advocacy path. We got to let the lawyers, the women and men, do what they do best. Lawsuits will happen, but we have got to make sure we go out and vote, and we got to elect more Democrats, women and men, who are going to have the political power and positioning to push back on what we just saw happen in Washington.
Final question. You said Democrats have to hold the Republicans accountable. Have we seen any of the gubernatorial candidates even touch voter rights right now?
On Democratic side, yeah, all of them are talking about it. I mean, you know, Michael Thurman sent out a statement right away. Keisha Lance Bottoms has talked about it. She's been on national news. I know Jason Estevez talked about it in one of his telephone town hall meetings. Have not heard much from Jeff Duncan. I'm not saying he hasn't said anything, but I have not heard from him. But they need to get elected. They need to make it plain and for people can understand. I think the one thing that we all had to do as Democrats is that we had to let them know that it was a possibility that Florida was the first one to go out there and redraw some maps and present in other southern states. We had to make sure that this governor, Governor Kemp, did not follow suit on what we saw in the other southern states.
Tharon Johnson, thank you for setting this up for us, everyone. Of course, now we start our interviews with the gubernatorial candidates for the state of Georgia.
Thank you.
Thank you.